The global inflation battle has been a hot topic for years, with many countries facing rising prices, economic uncertainty, and struggling to regain stability. In 2024, we're asking a crucial question. Is the global inflation battle over? While some signs point to improvements, the reality is much more complicated. So let's dive into the key factors shaping prices in 2024 and what this means for consumers, businesses, and economies worldwide. First, let's talk about the good news. Inflation has shown signs of slowing down in some parts of the world. Central banks in major economies like the US and Europe have been aggressive in raising interest rates to curb inflation. And in some places, the inflation rate has dropped significantly. For example, in the US, inflation peaked in mid-2022 at over 9%, but by early 2024, it has cooled to around 3%. While these numbers are encouraging, it's important to remember that inflation doesn't just magically disappear overnight. In fact, we're not just dealing with inflation as a single problem. There are underlying factors that are still in play, making the economic landscape more complex. One key factor to consider is the ongoing supply chain issues. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted global supply chains in ways we are still feeling today. Lockdowns, labor shortages, and geopolitical tensions led to delays and higher costs for raw materials, energy, and even labor. In 2024, many industries are still struggling to fully recover. For instance, the semiconductor chip shortage is still impacting everything from automotive production to electronics. When supply is low and demand is high, prices tend to rise. That's why some sectors are seeing persistent price increases, even though inflation is generally slowing. Another major issue is energy prices. Over the past few years, we've seen volatile oil prices, which in turn drive up the cost of nearly everything, from transportation to manufacturing. While oil prices have slightly stabilized, it's important to understand that energy is still a huge factor in inflation. If oil prices spike again due to geopolitical tensions or unforeseen events, we could see inflationary pressures rise again, making it feel like the battle is far from over, driving up wages in several sectors. In 2024, we're seeing some wage growth continue, but not at the same pace as in the post-pandemic years. However, businesses are still adjusting, and rising wages often lead to higher prices for goods and services. So while wages are good for workers, they can contribute to inflation if companies pass on the cost to consumers. Then there's the issue of government spending. The economic stimulus packages implemented during the pandemic injected significant money into the economy, contributing to inflation. In 2024, governments are scaling back relief efforts, but the lingering effects of increased spending could still impact inflation, particularly in emerging markets. Inflation is also driven by demand. High consumer demand can push prices up, especially if supply doesn't keep pace. Central banks have raised interest rates to curb inflation, but prolonged high rates could risk stifling growth and lead to recession. Despite slowing headline inflation, prices for essentials like food, housing, and rent remain high in many regions. Geopolitical tensions, such as the war in Ukraine, could further disrupt markets and fuel inflation. While inflation has slowed, factors like supply chain issues, energy prices, and government spending mean the battle is far from over.